So I'm sitting at Family TLC in beautiful downtown Barrie with my amazing guest, Sue Cook. She's a therapist, she's a counselor, she does so many wonderful things, and she's so involved in the community. Sue, thank you for taking the time from your very busy schedule to meet with me today.
It's a pleasure. I'm really happy to be here.
So you're a social worker, counselor, you do all these different things. What are some of the other things that you do down here?
So I'm the owner of Family TLC. So I started Family TLC years ago and got into private practice in 2000, started Family TLC officially in 2008. And we also do workshops. I do a lot of workshops traveling to First Nations communities throughout Ontario, do teaching. So I do a lot of teaching through the collaborative divorce process of helping people get a positive divorce experience instead of a riddled with conflict kind of experience. And we have a whole team here, and we provide services to, if you're under 3 or over 93, we can't help you, but in between we got you covered.
Well, that's a pretty good window. You got 90 years you can work with.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said that you work with First Nations. That's a really tough thing right now in this, especially in the province of Ontario. We really don't seem to give enough attention to First Nations people, and everything from poor drinking water to just reaching out to them and dealing with their high suicide rates, right? So what are some of the things that you notice about First Nations?
That's a really tough subject to talk about for me, to tell you the honest truth, because I went up north to a place called Fort Hope, and it's a reserve that it took me over an hour and a half to fly from Thunder Bay, and just riddled with just so many things that it's just hard to sort of list them all off. You know, fires, deaths, suicides, homicides, abuse, just riddled with loss of language, loss of culture. Honestly, when I was there, I've never felt ashamed to be a Canadian until I went there and thought, what are we doing to our First Nations communities? And it's an ongoing history for them that's happened. So that was a tough, that's always tough to go and do. And I think when I go, I want to do 125%, you know, I want to give everything I've got, and find that part of the work can be tiring. So as a therapist, I've really had to learn how to do my boundaries around that and keep myself healthy when I go up to those kinds of communities. But it isn't something I ever want to stop, because I think we all as Canadians have a responsibility to just make a difference.
Well, we tend to look at things and we get offended, or we get upset, or we get sad, and you see stuff, but then it's as easy as scroll, and we scroll past it. We see something on CTV News or BBC, or we see something in the province of Ontario, or we blame Parliament, whatever, or a politician for it. But we got to look at ourselves. Because we're not really great as a society. We're just not. You know?
And that's what we do mostly here at Family TLC. You know, we have people coming in here. We have lots of people coming to see us, and you know what I find so exciting is I think our industry is growing. Like I think more and more people are stepping up to the plate for themselves. You know, they're coming in and they're saying, I want to work on me, I want to work on my relationship, I want to improve my family. You know, and it's funny. My mom says to me, how's business? And I say, it's good, it's really good, we're really busy. And she says, oh, that's sad. And I'm like, Mom, it's not sad, it's a good thing, because she's in her 80s, right? So she comes from that perspective that, you know, you don't talk about your problems, or you don't go out and do that, right? But I'm just finding, I'm so impressed with people. I'm so impressed how they're willing to pick up that phone, call, and say, hey, I need help. And come and meet with somebody who can genuinely help them in a non-judgmental fashion. And we're just seeing so much success where people are really improving themselves, their relationships. Like, that's really exciting.
Well, I've noticed a real trend in people who can actually now talk. We've done a really good job with so many things, from depression to marriage and divorce. People are talking. And people aren't necessarily so ashamed, and I guess people have downplayed a lot of the reasons why they've gotten separated or divorced, and now they're willing to communicate. I think people understand that they do love each other, and mistakes happen, and people are human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That human and that self-compassion, you know, and it's such an honor really to sit with somebody who comes in and talks to you and tells you about their story of their life, right? And you know that they're not having the opportunity to talk to somebody who's actually just going to sit and listen and attune and show them unconditional positive regard.
Yeah.
And to have somebody be able to take that courage, mix it with that vulnerability, and open up into what they've got going on, you just sit back as a therapist and you're just like, wow, that's really cool to be able to be there for somebody and let them do that and build that rapport with them. That's really cool. And people are talking more. You're right.
Yeah. Well, I think so. And what I've noticed too is people like to think that they're getting counseling from friends, and they're not, because some friends will just tell you exactly what you want to hear. So you shut up.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And, all right, way to go. But people do that. And I've noticed it in my life, and other people do it around, like, just everywhere. People will sometimes just tell you what you want to hear so that you feel better. They want to give you that hug. They want to help you. Yeah. But they can't really. And that's where you really fit in. Yeah. Because I've also noticed too is you don't have a problem talking, which is really great. But that's great because when people are talking to you, you don't just sit there and go, here's my bill. It's okay, well here's some positivity, here's some creative ideas. Talk it out. Yeah. Right?
For sure. And the other thing that your friends do is if they'll give you what they think works but it's actually for themselves. Or they'll transfer their issues onto you, right? Yep. So if you're talking to them about something that's going on in their life and they are uncomfortable with what you're saying, then they'll pull out the advice, which I honestly feel like it's well-meaning, but it's kind of like something written on a paper that they've thrown in the garbage because it didn't really work for them, or they tried to make it work, or
those
whatever.
Those positive change cat memes that you see on Facebook,
exactly.
And it's like, wow, great, hang in there.
Exactly.
Everybody knows that one.
Yeah, exactly. So they try. You know, people do try, and I think, you know, all the therapists here have had, 6-7 years post-secondary education, right? We're trained. We understand the psychology. We understand how to listen. We understand how to watch for the themes and patterns that people have going on in their life. And it's amazing to be a therapist in the sense that you're sitting there listening, you're hearing what the person's saying, you're acknowledging, you're letting the person know that you do hear. But at the same time, in the back of your head, you've got this sort of case conceptualization going on. So you're paying attention. What's the themes? What's the patterns? What are the core beliefs that might be underneath this stuff? What's the concerns that are really kind of we're not talking about that is underneath all of this stuff, right? Over and above the surface stuff that you're hearing.
Sure.
And that's why I don't use my therapist skills in public. Because it's too much work.
Your power is only for good.
But it's too much work, right? People find out I'm a therapist and they're like, oh, you're analyzing me. And I'm like, no, no, I need to be sitting in my chair at my office to do that. It's too much work.
Oh, that's funny. I can see that for sure. So when you kind of back this up a little bit, where do you feel that you found your skills and your ability to do this? We're going to back this up a bit and go back into the Who is Sue thing.
Okay, sure.
Where are you from? Let's find that out.
So I grew up in British Columbia.
Okay.
I was raised in a place called Tsawwassen, which is where you catch the ferry to go over to Vancouver Island.
Cool.
I grew up in a family, a British family. My mother and father came from Britain, and so the culture in our family was pretty hidden. Right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar with the British culture, but it's not blatant. It's not, it kind of reminds me of, meat and potatoes. It's just kind of plain and bland, and my father was struggled with anxiety, struggled with depression. He had a time in his life when he tried to take his life. And I was a teenager when that happened and had no clue really what was going on, right?
Wow.
And my mom, she always played the role of being, a great support for my dad, but very emotionally absent. She just sort of had that British stiff upper lip, and did what she could. very caring and very nurturing, and I have no complaints, but she just played that role.
Yeah.
So when my dad went through his what they called nervous breakdown, my mom had to find a way to really step up to the plate. And as a teenager, I just didn't get it all. I didn't understand what was going on. All I kind of figured out was that, and in some way, in a selfish way, I was like, oh, we can't afford to buy those designer jeans for me anymore, right? I was pretty self-focused.
Yeah.
And then my dad kind of started to get better. He got some help. I don't know what he did because it was never really talked about, because you didn't talk about those types of things, right?
Sure.
And then as a teenager, when I sort of hit 16, I'm the youngest in my family, so I'm probably a little bit of a spoiled brat, you know, if you're completely honest.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest.
And I started when I was kind of like 16, really rebelling against my parents. You know, it's amazing how from like 16 to 25, your parents are jerks. Right?
And suddenly the switch goes.
Yeah, they're
right?
just terrible, right?
Yeah.
And so I ran away from home
Yeah.
at 16 and spent a lot of time surviving on my own and figuring it out. And my dad and mom didn't give up on me. You know, they really kept pursuing me and trying to find me. But if I'm completely honest, I saw a therapist at that time. And I probably can't swear, but as a 16-year-old, meeting a therapist telling me what he thought and what he thought I should do, I told him where to go, how to get there, and got up and left, right?
Yeah.
So I really did not relate to him at all. And I think, well, I'm proud of who I am. So who I am and what happened in my life is what makes me the person that I am.
Yeah.
I always have wondered, though, if he had have been able to connect with me better and really relate with me better, would I have run away? Would I have sort of put my parents through the worry and fear that I put them through, right?
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about being a selfish brat and entitlement and wanting to get what I wanted to get, you know. And so I negotiated with my dad and said, you buy me a car and I'll come home.
Nice. You weren't specific, though. You didn't say Tesla or Subaru.
No,
just a car.
Just buy me a car. So he got me a $500 Datsun. That's how old I am, right?
Good little car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went home, and then I found sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know, and went in that direction of my life, and ended up having some things that were done to me that were criminal, that caused me to be a real victim of sexual assault and that sort of stuff.
Sorry.
And I learned how to shove that down, to just keep it down and not talk about it. I didn't tell anybody. I also had a pregnancy that I terminated, so I just didn't tell people about all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Just pushed it down and thought, you know, I'm doing a great job. Like, I graduated from high school despite the drugs, you know, hotboxing. I'm probably going to get in trouble, right? But hotbox in the bathroom, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I just,
sure.
you know, I did all of that stuff, and I learned the power of the female body, right? And I thought, you know, I got power, I'm doing my things, I'm going to university, I got it all under control, right?
Yeah.
But really, I was an angry bitch. I really was, right? You know, just angry, because all that stuff is just piled up inside you, and you're not talking about it, you're not getting it out, and you pretend that you've got it all together, right? And I finally found a therapist who I really liked, and I think that therapist just kind of told me what I wanted to hear. So it really wasn't helpful.
No.
Right? Just like you said, as a friend, right?
Yeah.
So then I went eventually to another therapist, and they were accepting and caring, but direct. They were, you know, creative with me, but they didn't let me outsmart them or hide things or whatever. They went in and really helped me take a really good look at myself.
Nice. So they dug deep and had ideas.
Yeah. And then I did some other work as far as kind of workshops and that kind of stuff, and really started to learn a lot about myself. And while I was doing all of that, I was really fascinated in college and university about the breakdown of the family. I really felt like our family unit, our family institution really broke down. And I was also really fascinated with relationships and communication.
Yeah.
Right? But I didn't have a direction. I felt like a puppet, that a marionette was just kind of moving around, right? And so I was working in the school system with at-risk teenagers. I was just kind of going from job to job, and I get bored easily, so I would jump after sort of 5 years into something else, right? And just kind of jump from this to that. And my husband actually said to me at one point, he said, "I think you should run your own business." And I was like, what? Because I came from a union family. I didn't come from a family that started businesses, right? What are you talking about, right? And so in 2000 is when I'd finished my master's degree in counseling, and I remember the day I opened up my first office here in Barrie, and we were putting the legs on the bottom of the chair, turning the chair over as my first client was arriving, right?
Amazing.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And I just had a great opportunity to start learning how to take the things I'd learned in school, take my own personal experience, and know from personal experience how important it is to have somebody that can really connect with you and build that therapeutic relationship. And that's where it started.
Wow.
And I think I've stuck at it. Because the business part keeps me engaged as well, right? Like I really enjoy the therapy. I really enjoy meeting people. Whenever I think I haven't heard, like I've heard it all, I hear something different, which is so great. But the business side of it is really a lot of pushes me, makes me learn a lot of other things too. So
well, it's pretty amazing how that is a whole lot of stuff going on. Right? And people will go to university for all this time, or people go and do all these things, and they come from a good family and they have all these things, and they go out and they want to start a practice like what you do. And they're not going to be, and I hate to say it, you can have the biggest heart, but without the real world experience, it's hard to be as compassionate, it's hard to be as empathetic, and it's hard to be as understanding, and it's hard to be as creative as you are. Because you have to be creative to be able to say, okay, I can see why this guy screwed up, or I can see why this woman screwed up, or I can see where these challenges are for these children. Right? And you get to see them because you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Been there, done that.
Well, more so than most. You know? And so when you back all that up and you kind of roll it into a big ball, how do you find in your daily practice, do you ever have a story that comes through that you're like, oh, I remember going through that, you know? How is that for you? Like, do you sometimes go back home at the end of hearing a couple argue, or, you know, somebody coming in talking about their depression or whatever? Do you take some of that baggage home with you sometimes and try to set it aside? How do you handle that?
Well, in the beginning, when I first started private practice, that was very, very difficult. And then I learned how to kind of like intentionally lock the door, so to speak. So when you lock the door, you lock everything here, right? And you leave it here and you head home, and you have a bit of a buffer zone between home and here. There's definitely stories that you hear that you're thinking, wow, like that's an awful thing for somebody to have to go through. And so one of the reasons why I really have pushed in building Family TLC is because it's important to me that the therapists here, that all of us here, whether it's client services that does intake or marketing, or all of the therapists, the students that come here, that we have a sense of family. So the reality is, in private practice, the culture is usually silo. It's usually somebody working by themselves, sitting, talking to a client, and they don't have a lot of support around them. And I wanted an organization that wrapped around support around the people that do the job, right? So we have each other here that we can debrief with, because we're all bound by confidentiality, so we can talk to each other here in the rooms, right? So we've got that, and then you develop just strategies to be able to not take it home and know if you are taking it home and what can you do. But I think the thing that really helps me is I just totally believe human beings are so frickin' resilient.
We're stronger than people realize.
Yeah.
We really are.
We are, right? There's this core in people that are just, you know, once they sit with somebody and are able to really take a look at stuff and get a sense of options or whatever, like the power. I remember one client that I had years and years ago was going through a loss, a tragic loss. And she said to me she had gone to see other therapists and everybody was trying to help and fix, right?
Yeah.
And I just sat with her in that loss. I had the courage to sink down with her where she was and sit with her and wait until she was ready to come up.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes all it takes is just having somebody who's willing to be there with you, right?
Yeah.
And that resilience can come through.
Well, when you see some people talk about, let's say, depression online, some people can be really open and honest, and some people will never ever talk about it because they're just embarrassed of it.
Yeah.
But it takes the right person to know how to wiggle the lock, I guess you could say, right, to help unload it. But sometimes you see people who are just like, oh, you're depressed, just get over it.
Yeah.
Or it's not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to be, for you, in a zone where you can listen and like sort of soak it in.
Yep.
Because you have to kind of go there.
Yep.
To help understand it, because then you can unpack it.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And that takes self-care. Like, we have to practice what we preach. We really do, in order to be able to be there and go there with people.
Yeah, and you can't just tell somebody to go to counseling. They have to be willing to go too, right? They have to be willing to open up.
Well, there's a lot of people actually that do that, right? Like, you know, teenagers come to us because their parents think that they need to go for counseling, you know, or, you know, a spouse will come in and say, you know, call up and say, you know, my spouse told me that I need to book counseling or we're done, right?
Yeah.
You know, so there are circumstances where that happens. But once they get in the room and I think that a lot of the obstacles for people is they don't know what it is. They don't know what they're doing when they get here, right? The unknown. And then the stigmas and the myths and that kind of stuff. And so, but yes, you're right. People have to be willing to find some, counseling means change.
Yep.
And they got to be willing to find some motivation or to take introspection, you know, and if they're not willing to do that, then it's going to be hard to make change, for sure.
Well, you shouldn't stay depressed. Being sad is okay, but staying there is not. Right? So turning that wheel and sometimes getting into their level and understanding maybe what's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe people also don't realize quite what you've been through in life to understand how relatable you're actually going to be.
Yeah.
And I do love that you give an opinion. Now, what are some of those things that, I know you're not going to give us names or whatever, but are there some particular things that have happened, highs and lows? You know, what are some of your favorite moments in what you do?
Wow. That gave me chills, actually, and I have to think of one. Favorite moments. I actually am really stepping into loving supervising right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, my vision with Family TLC is to open other offices. I want people to have a place that they can go to where they're like, oh, I know I'm going to get really good therapy there, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm passionate about growing Family TLC. And so one of the parts that I'm really focusing on this year is getting better at teaching the art of therapy and fine-tuning what supervising another therapist is all about. So we've developed a one-year training program here. So anybody that starts at Family TLC has to go through this one-year program. And doing that one-year program was sort of developing how to teach a therapist to be a therapist in private practice. Even when people have done their master's degree, they still need that additional support.
Sure.
And now I'm really enjoying sitting with the therapists and figuring out how to help the therapists take feedback and how to help the therapists grow and learn and that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy that. I also really, honestly, like the therapy part is wonderful and I really do enjoy that, but I'm really enjoying the whole, everything I have to learn as a business owner. Like that is just like so challenging and so frustrating and so much growth.
That's the real world of it too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you look back at some of those times, is there something that kind of stands out as a tough time?
Yeah, I think growing a business, being an entrepreneur and growing a business, not coming from business experience in a family.
Yeah.
Both my parents were, as I said before, union. What the heck? Like the ups and downs, you know, you think you bring somebody on to work with the organization, you think they're a great fit and they turn out not to be, or you sometimes you'll see things and it'll be like shiny object, like I'm going to go do this marketing thing over here, you know, and then I just wasted $2,000 on that, right?
Yeah.
So
business.
It struggling with, you know, I took a computer software program and I customized it for Family TLC, so we have it all online and all like electronic. We're a paperless office.
Nice.
And learning how to program the workflow or do the filters and that kind of stuff, you know, sitting there going, oh my gosh, how am I going to figure this out? Because you're alone as an entrepreneur, right? You're alone and trying to learn as you go and not beat yourself up for the mistakes that you've made.
And it's hard to delegate. It can be really hard to delegate.
Yes, true, yeah.
So if you were to kind of look through this incredible life you've had, ups and downs, the incredible people that you meet, is there a message that you've learned that you would love to share? Is there something that you could just say that would be, this is my message, this is what I want people to know?
I don't know, I just want to say you got it for some reason. Like, you know, with the right support and surrounding yourself with the right people or connecting with the right person, you got it. Like you can do it, you know. But I think for me, I always think about, as corny as this sounds, you know, Canadian geese, like they fly together and they make it really freaking far. Like they go far, right?
Yeah.
You know? And if you're trying to do it by yourself, whether it's an entrepreneur, whether it's a marriage, you know, and running into difficulty in a marriage, like if you get the right support, you got it. You can do it. Like that, you really can. You know, I had a email come from a couple after emailing them and following up. You know, and they said, you know what? I think we're good. You took our relationship to a place that we never thought it could get to.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I walked with them and I helped them with that, but they had the answers inside. They had the capacity to do that. I just helped them see it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because people do comparisons, like they say, if you drop a plate on the ground and you put it back together, is it the same plate, right? And it's really not. But it's also the same as if you break a bone. Where that bone is broken, it's stronger in that spot where it was broken.
True.
And so someone like you can help build that bone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and we feel really good about the people we have here. You know, I see them, the other therapists, like that's another thing that's huge for me. You know, like I'll have another therapist be working with a client and then the client will leave. The other day we had our team meeting. We were waiting to start our team meeting. We forgot there was somebody in, you know, seeing a therapist, and they walked out and I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like we're all out there ready to meet, right? And the person walked out the door and I was, you know, thank you very much. And I was gently sort of going to shut the door behind her. And she turned around and she looked at me and she said, you know, that therapist that I worked with, I've worked with many therapists and he has helped me and I'm going to spread the word, right?
Love it.
And for me to hear that about somebody that's come on to Family TLC and is part of the team, like that's pretty cool.
So thank you, Sue, so much for being a guest on my show, and I really love your message of you've got this. It's such an important message to people, and I love what you do here, so thank you for being a guest on my show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sue.
Awesome.